Welcome back to Burnout Break Room, the podcast that's like a break room, but helpful, where we look at burnout through a realistic lens, talk about ways to take a break from the grind, and spill the tea. I'm Lyndie Larimore, licensed therapist, certified career coach, and consultant.
And I'm Caitlin Truhella, creativity coach and speaker.
We're your hosts, and thank you for joining us here in the Burnout Break Room. Hi, Caitlin. How you doing?
Hey, Lindy. I'm doing good. How are you?
Not bad. Not bad. What's been going on with you?
I am happy to have been doing a lot more reading. I say a lot more as if I'm not usually buried in like six different books at a time. But definitely taking the summer as an opportunity to read more. I may have mentioned this before in another episode, but having come out of getting my English degree, my goal was to reconnect with genres and types of books that I like to read.
Mm, mm,
what
mm,
what is my preferred, reading genre? Because before I wouldn't have been able to answer that question.
mm. Well, there you go. And speaking of books, Caitlin, it sounds as if you have a very exciting book to be sharing with us that sheds a lot of new and very old light on burnout and burnout research.
Yes. So I have been mulling over and percolating over some research that I came across because one of the nonfiction works that I was looking at, and honestly, not even with any intention of finding out about more about burnout. So this was an unexpected positive result. But I have here Daniele Cybulskie's book, How to Live Like a Monk: Medieval Wisdom for Modern Life.
Oh, that looks fun.
Yes, and I will tell you one of the things that I have been really interested in learning more about is the difference between discipline and devotion. Because so much of the time when we set goals, we tend to look at them. I especially think of like New Year's resolutions. We start these goals with such fervor and with such high expectations for what we want to achieve, how we're going to get there. And, we're going to come through the other side being the best at said thing. And of course, motivation is really difficult to maintain, not to mention energy levels and balancing all the other things we have in our life at the same time. And so, yeah, looking at the difference between how we approach those situations, whether it's through a very regimented, disciplined approach, or, and again, depending on the goal, do we approach it with devotion? Because when you have devotion for a goal or something that you want to achieve, the inherent motivation in that approach is through love. So this is essentially what brought me to wanting to learn more about the monastic lifestyle, and also allow me to just preface this as well. This is not intended to have any particular religious message or religious bent. And let me also say that not only in the research, but as we talk about this, monk does, as a position, does usually refer to a male position.
Mhm.
But please know that we of course, are including everyone in this experience. And even historically, there were many different positions that applied to different folks being, men and women. So please rest assured, we are including everyone in this perspective.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it sounds fascinating, Caitlin. So, this idea of committing to something through love, through devotion, reminds me a little bit of what in therapy when we talk about change and specifically a lifestyle change, right? There's the
Mm,
research shows that it is a multi-stage process that tends to be cyclic. And part of change is, in substance use, they use the term relapse, but often part of change is going back to old behaviors and then learning how to return back to the new way of life. But one of the things that I think can be so helpful when talking about change is that one of the biggest stages that tends to take up a lot of time and energy is the maintenance stage. And
Mm,
and this applies to any change, right? Whether it's changing exercise habits or changing work habits, these stages of change apply. And so when I work with folks through the maintenance stage, it's it's sometimes monotonous, sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's frustrating, definitely not exciting as the preparation stage or the action stage of change. There's usually a lot of support from folks. There's usually a lot of adrenaline, and it's reminding me of this idea that if you want change, it's usually the things that you are devoted to. When there's devotion to something, then there might be a little bit of an easier time getting through those more difficult stages.
definitely. And the point of support that you mentioned too is such a big part of that as well, because these things don't happen in a vacuum. And I'm sure there's overwhelming, research on this as well. But when we work towards a goal as a community, or like when you have some other form of outside support, even people who are just aware of what you're doing and you can talk to about it, has tremendous impact on not only the achieving the goal itself, but that maintenance that you're talking about through all those stages. Because and even the book on perfection that I mentioned previously, The Perfectionist Guide to Letting Go, I believe is the exact title of the book. They talk about this too, that with certain types of perfection, the a lot of the motivation comes from starting.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as the starting has passed and the that initial excitement wears off, it's much more difficult to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to the point of community as well, one of the interesting points that I found in this study of the monk's practice is how oftentimes these communities, were established for that purpose, because in order to maintain a monastery, it required a lot of people. Because even though they would, say, for example, like maintain their own gardens, have obviously very humble living quarters, they still had to maintain the area. And so everyone had prescribed duties that they needed to accomplish throughout the day, in addition to their devotion practices, whether that was different religious services or doing their prayers or acting as a support for the community, visiting the sick, feeding the poor, spending time with, the elderly. Everyone had different roles and responsibilities. But what I was absolutely astonished to find, Lyndie, is that the concept of burnout and needing to take a break from their work was even present in these monasteries in the 12th and 13th centuries. There's records of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for anyone who is feeling trapped by the modern lifestyle and the state of our current society,
Mm-hmm.
please know that you are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that as humans, we have been, dealing with the personal maintenance of this state for centuries.
Mm, mm, mm,
In this research, one of the ever present aspects of life in the monastery was time with nature.
mm,
And I'll read you a quote here from Albertus Magnus that says, "Nothing refreshes the sight so much as fine, short grass." So, as I mentioned before, all of the members of a monastery would have different duties and responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities was maintaining their gardens, which is also interesting because it was not often seen as a chore because working with the land, working in the gardens, whether it was for harvesting their vegetables and their food or simply by maintaining the gardens, it was often a an enviable task to have as a part of your schedule because it was so renewing. But even to that recognition of having the element of nature in your everyday life, monks still were not immune to burnout in general. One of the things that is mentioned in the ancient monastic rule is this individual rule itself. And when I say rule, I mean RULE. So literally rules to live by. It says, keep yourselves in such rest that long thereafter ye may labor the more vigorously in God's service. And so there was the recognition that rest is necessary not only to maintain the body, mind, and spirit, but also supports the vigor needed to pursue your goals. And of course, in this case, the goal being religious, but this can apply much farther than that. And so for the leaders in these monastic groups, if they saw that anyone in the community was experiencing any kind of burnout, the regimen or the recommended practice was not to go deeper into their prayers or deeper into the word or to do more in the community. It was for complete rest, more walks throughout the garden, more literally just more sleep as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And the fact that this was not branded as laziness or a lack of devotion or, motivation to their goal, I think speaks so tremendously to this continued recognition of the need for rest in all practices.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And it's surprising to hear because I think, well, a part of me never thought of the monastic practice as being an easy life. It certainly seemed like one where you would just, I think a part of me felt like, oh, you would just leave the world and leave society, and then you wouldn't have to deal with stress.
Mm,
So it is fascinating to know that even then, before probably the concept of stress as we know it now, or definitely the concept of burnout as we know it now, was part of the conversation,
mm.
that people were looking out for the signs. Caitlan, how would you take some of these things and apply them to modern life?
I would say the most applicable part of this from a modern lens is also being aware of how you're spending your time.
Mm.
Because I feel like one of the most difficult things to maintain balance with in modern life is the amount of goals that, we are expected to have. You have to maintain your physical health, your mental health, your career, your personal relationships. And then, especially if you're an ambitious person by any degree, you have personal bucket lists and things like that. So I think the recognition that everything happens in its own time, to everything there is a season.
Mhm.
And so we have to, I think even just recognizing that, we have to give ourselves time to do all of the things in the context for which they serve,
Mhm.
I think is a really important thing to remember.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's such a fascinating study. And again, what is the name of the book again and the author?
It is How to Live Like a Monk: Medieval Wisdom for Modern Life by Daniele Cybulskie. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing their name incorrectly. But yeah, this was a really interesting read with a lot of references from as I said before, like ancient texts and even individual stories from practicing monks and folks practicing that lifestyle, but also the consideration that went into making that choice as well. Because when first joining this lifestyle and making, taking these vows, it was taken so seriously that in the first year they were there, had the option to leave. And
Mm.
as on a final note, I think that's another thing to remember for modern life as well. Nobody likes being a quitter. Nobody likes, thinking that they wasted their time with a particular goal or practice, but it takes a lot of bravery to quit something. But ultimately, if it's not serving you or if it's taking more than you are getting out of it,
Mm.
to continue pursuing something that's not serving you is the same as being irresponsible for your own self-care.
Mm. Mm.
I guess then today's message is don't be afraid to quit.
Be a quitter.
Right.
You heard it here first. Yes, come on in. The water's warm. Quitting's great.
Right. But thank you, Lindy, for joining me on this stroll through the monastic garden grounds.
Been quite lovely.
When when we are not sharing monastic research in the break room, where can people find you?
Well, it might not be as enlightening, but lindylaurimore.com. You can find more about my coaching practice, my consulting practice. I'm helping individuals and businesses help prevent burnout, recover from burnout, and create spaces where burnout is no longer an issue. Caitlin, what about you? Where can we find you when you're not sharing your wisdom in the break room?
You can find me at my brand new website, CaitlinTruhella.com.
Ooh.
And as well as social media, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and a lot of the others. For anyone who is looking for author support, either with book editing or general creative support, I do ideation sessions as well as creative coaching as well. So either reach out to me through socials or send me an email. I would love to support you.
Well, thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you, Lindy. Until next time.
Till next time.